Blood is thicker than water, but a multi-million-dollar check will evaporate both in seconds. I found out my own parents liquidated my inheritance while I was thousands of miles away. They thought they committed the perfect, untraceable crime. But they forgot one crucial detail. Grandpa gave me the last paper. To understand how my own flesh and blood could orchestrate such a massive, calculated betrayal, you have to understand the dynamic of the Miller family. My grandfather, Harrison Miller, was a self-made titan. He built a sprawling lumber and real estate empire in upstate New York from absolute scratch. He was a man of calloused hands, sharp instincts, and a deeply ingrained sense of loyalty. My parents, on the other hand, were the exact opposite. My father, Robert, was Harrison's only son, but he had inherited none of his grit. Robert was a perpetually failing investment banker who preferred the illusion of wealth over the actual work required to build it. He married my mother, Eleanor, a country club socialite whose own family had quietly gone bankrupt in the late 90s. Together, they were a match made in superficial heaven. They lived in a rented Manhattan penthouse, leased matching luxury cars every year, and threw extravagant dinner parties to impress people they secretly despised. They were drowning in a sea of high-interest debt, desperate to keep up appearances, waiting for the day my grandfather would finally pass away so they could inherit the Miller fortune and wipe the slate clean. But Grandpa Harrison was no fool. He saw right through their velvet-lined charade. Because of their constant networking trips and social obligations, I spent most of my childhood being shipped off to Grandpa Harrison's primary residence, Alder Creek. It was a breathtaking, 1,200-acre estate nestled in the Hudson Valley, complete with a historic stone manor, private lakes, and centuries-old timber forests. It wasn't just a piece of property. It was the beating heart of the Miller legacy. While my parents were out drinking champagne with hedge fund managers, Grandpa was teaching me how to read topographical maps, how to negotiate land leases, and how to spot a bad contract from a mile away. We spent countless evenings in his mahogany-paneled study, the smell of cigar smoke and old leather hanging in the air, going over the ledgers of his various businesses. By the time I was 22, I understood the inner workings of his empire better than my father ever had. "You have the Miller spine, Harper," Grandpa told me one rainy evening, coughing heavily into a handkerchief. His health had been rapidly declining for months. "Your father has a spine made of wet paper. When I'm gone, he and your mother are going to try to tear all of this down to fund their foolishness. But I won't let them." It was during that same evening that he opened his heavy iron safe and pulled out a thick, wax-sealed manila envelope. He slid it across the desk toward me. His eyes, usually sparkling with wry humor, were dead serious. "Take this. Put it in a safety deposit box at a bank your parents don't know about," he instructed, his voice a raspy whisper. "Do not open it. Do not tell Robert or Eleanor it exists. You will only open this envelope if the vultures start circling Alder Creek." I took the envelope. It felt impossibly heavy in my hands. I promised him I would keep it safe, and the very next morning, I secured it in a private vault at a small regional bank in town. 3 weeks later, Harrison Miller passed away. The funeral was a spectacle of fake tears and designer black mourning suits. My mother actually complained about the caterer at the wake while standing 10 feet from the casket. But the real performance began during the reading of the will in the office of Donovan Hayes, my grandfather's longtime estate lawyer. My parents sat on the edge of their leather chairs, practically vibrating with anticipation. They were expecting the keys to the kingdom. Instead, Donovan dropped a legal bombshell. Grandpa Harrison had left the bulk of his liquid assets to various local charities. As for Alder Creek, the crown jewel worth roughly $15 million, it was placed into a highly restrictive trust. I was named the sole beneficiary of the estate, but because I was only 23 at the time, Robert and Eleanor were named as the trustees and legal custodians of the property until my 25th birthday. The terms were strict. They were to maintain the estate, pay the property taxes from a designated escrow account, and hand over the keys to me the second I turned 25. They were expressly forbidden from developing the land. My father was furious. His face turned a dangerous shade of crimson. "He left it to a child?" Robert yelled, slamming his hand on Donovan's desk. "I'm his son! I have debts, I have investments that need capital right now." "Those were your father's wishes, Robert," Donovan replied coldly. For the next year, the tension in our family was suffocating. But eventually, things seemed to settle. I was offered a prestigious 2-year architectural fellowship in London. I didn't want to leave Alder Creek, but my parents practically pushed me out the door. "Go to Europe, Harper," my mother had cooed, adjusting her diamond tennis bracelet. "Expand your horizons. Your father and I will handle the tedious maintenance of the estate. When you get back, it will all be waiting for you." I should have known that a snake doesn't stop biting just because you look away. I moved to London, diving into my fellowship, believing my grandfather's ironclad trust was enough to protect my legacy. I had exactly 14 months until my 25th birthday. I didn't realize my parents had found a loophole, and I certainly didn't realize they were already actively conspiring to sell my inheritance right out from under me. The first red flag came exactly 8 months into my fellowship. I was sitting in a coffee shop near Covent Garden when my phone buzzed. It was Aunt Vivian, my mother's estranged sister, who lived a few towns over from Alder Creek. Vivian and my mother hated each other, mostly because Vivian was grounded in reality and refused to lend Eleanor any more money. "Harper, are you sitting down?" Vivian asked, her voice tight with panic. "I am. What's wrong?" "There are construction crews at Alder Creek," she said. "I drove by this morning. The main gates were tied open. There were excavators near the South Woods, and moving trucks backed up to the manor. I tried to call your father, but he sent me straight to voicemail." My blood ran completely cold. The trust explicitly forbade any development or alteration of the land. "That's impossible," I stammered, my heart hammering against my ribs. "The trust doesn't allow it. They must just be doing roof repairs or something." "Harper," Vivian said softly. "They were taking down your grandfather's cast iron sign. There's a new billboard by the highway. It says, 'Future site of the Whispering Pines Luxury Resort, a Preston Cole development.'" Preston Cole. I knew that name. He was a ruthless, slick real estate mogul who specialized in buying up historic properties, gutting them, and turning them into soulless luxury retreats for billionaires. Grandpa Harrison had despised him. Cole had tried to buy Alder Creek 3 times while my grandfather was alive, and Grandpa had literally chased him off the porch with a golf club. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't tell my fellowship director I was leaving. I booked the next available flight out of Heathrow to JFK, staring blankly at the seat in front of me for 7 agonizing hours, vibrating with a toxic mix of panic and pure, unadulterated rage. When I finally pulled my rental car up to the gates of Alder Creek the following afternoon, it was worse than Vivian had described. The ancient oak trees near the entrance had been marked with bright orange spray paint. A massive dumpster sat on the front lawn, filled with antique furniture I recognized from my childhood. I slammed the car into park, threw open the door, and sprinted into the manor. The foyer was unrecognizable. The Persian rugs were gone. Men in hard hats were actively tearing down the mahogany wainscoting. "Hey! Stop! What are you doing?" I screamed, my voice echoing off the bare walls. A tall man in a tailored Italian suit stepped out of my grandfather's study. He had slicked back hair and a smug, self-satisfied smile. It was Preston Cole himself. "Can I help you, miss? This is a private construction site," he said, looking me up and down with clear annoyance. "I am Harper Miller," I spat, marching right up to him. "This is my house. You are trespassing on my property. Call off your crews right now before I call the police." Preston let out a dry, condescending laugh. He reached into his leather briefcase on a nearby table and pulled out a thick stack of stapled documents. "Harper, right, the daughter. I'm afraid you're a little behind the times, sweetheart. I closed on this property 3 days ago. Wired $12 million directly to the Miller Estate Trust account. I have the deed, signed and notarized by the legal trustees." "They can't sell it," I yelled, my hands shaking violently. "It's in a trust until I turn 25. "Ah, yes," Preston smirked, tapping the paper. "But trusts have emergency clauses. Your parents invoked the financial distress and beneficiary ruin clause." They presented documentation to a judge proving that the estate's taxes and upkeep were bankrupting the trust, and by extension, you. The judge signed off on the liquidation to protect your financial future. It was completely legal. Your parents are the sellers on record. Now, I suggest you leave my property before I have my security escort you out. I felt the floor drop out from beneath me. Financial distress? The estate was fully funded by a separate life insurance policy Grandpa had set up. There was no financial distress. My parents had fabricated a crisis, bribed or tricked a judge, and sold my grandfather's legacy to his worst enemy just to get their hands on a multi-million-dollar payout. I didn't say another word to Preston Cole. I turned around, got back into my rental car, and drove the 2 hours straight to Manhattan. I bypassed the doorman at my parents' luxury high-rise, he knew me well enough not to stop me, and rode the elevator up to the penthouse. I didn't knock. I used my emergency key and kicked the heavy mahogany door wide open. Inside, classical music was playing. My mother, Eleanor, was sitting on a white velvet sofa, admiring a massive, sparkling new Cartier diamond necklace in a hand mirror. My father, Robert, was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, pouring a glass of expensive scotch, looking out over the city skyline like he owned it. They froze when they saw me standing in the foyer, dripping with rain, panting with rage. "Harper!" my mother gasped, quickly dropping the mirror. What are you doing home? You're supposed to be in London." "How much?" I asked, my voice terrifyingly calm. Robert set down his glass, exchanging a nervous glance with my mother before putting on his best, patronizing father-figure voice. "Harper, calm down. Let's talk about this like adults. I asked you how much you stole from me," I screamed, the sound tearing my throat. Robert's fake smile vanished, replaced by a cold, arrogant scowl. "We didn't steal anything. We saved you from yourself. You are 24 years old. You have no idea what it takes to manage 1,000 acres of commercial real estate. The taxes, the liability, it was a sinking ship. We liquidated the asset to protect you." "You sold it to Preston Cole," I cried, tears of pure fury stinging my eyes. "Grandpa hated him. You invoked a fake financial distress clause." "We did what was necessary," Eleanor chimed in, standing up and smoothing down her silk dress. She had the audacity to look annoyed, and we were well within our legal rights as trustees. "We sold it for $12 million. We took a standard 40% trustee management fee for our years of service and distress, and we put the remaining $7 million in an index fund for you. You're a very wealthy young woman, Harper. You should be thanking us." A 40% management fee, almost $5 million. Suddenly, it all made sense. The leased cars, the country club dues, the bad investments, the debt collectors had finally come knocking, and my parents had sold my birthright, my home, and my grandfather's life's work to save their own pathetic, superficial lives. "You forged financial documents to show distress," I said, my voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "That's a federal crime." Robert laughed, taking a sip of his scotch. "Prove it." The judge signed off. "The deed is transferred. Preston Cole owns Alder Creek, and the money is already offshore in our accounts. It's done, Harper. The ink is dry. Grow up, go back to London, and enjoy the $7 million we so graciously left you." They looked at me with such absolute triumph. They truly believed they had won. They thought they had outsmarted a dead man and a 24-year-old girl. They thought the sale was final, the money was theirs, and there was absolutely nothing I could do about it. I stared at my father's smug face, and then down at my mother's new Cartier necklace. The panic that had been suffocating me for the last 4 hours suddenly evaporated, replaced by a cold, razor-sharp clarity. "You're right," I said quietly, a slow, dark smile spreading across my face. "The ink is dry." I turned on my heel and walked out of the penthouse, letting the heavy door slam shut behind me. I didn't go to the airport to fly back to London. I didn't go to a hotel to cry. I went to the small regional bank in upstate New York. It was time to open the envelope. It was time to show them what Grandpa Harrison's last paper really said. The drive to the small regional bank took 2 hours, but the adrenaline pulsing through my veins made it feel like 10 minutes. The sky above the Hudson Valley had turned a bruised, stormy purple, perfectly matching the turbulent storm brewing inside my own chest. I pulled into the empty parking lot of the First Hudson Farmers Bank, a quaint, brick-and-mortar establishment that my parents, with their Manhattan penthouse and offshore accounts, didn't even know existed. I walked through the heavy glass doors, my boots clicking sharply against the polished terrazzo floor. The bank manager, a sweet older man named Mr. Abernathy, who had known my grandfather for 4 decades, recognized me immediately. He saw the frantic, wild look in my eyes and didn't even ask for my identification. He simply nodded, grabbed his heavy ring of brass keys, and led me down the carpeted stairs into the subterranean vault. He told me you would come eventually, Harper, Mr. Abernathy murmured, his voice echoing in the chilly, steel-lined room. He said you would only come when the wolves were at the door. The wolves are already inside the house, Mr. Abernathy, I replied, my voice shaking with a potent mixture of grief and pure rage. He unlocked box 814. I pulled the long metal drawer out, carried it to the private viewing booth, and locked the door behind me. My hands were trembling so violently I could barely grasp the edges of the thick, wax-sealed manila envelope my grandfather had given me that rainy night. I broke the brittle red wax seal. The satisfying crack echoed in the small room. I reached inside and pulled out a stack of impeccably preserved legal documents, along with a handwritten letter on my grandfather's personal heavy-stock stationery. I unfolded the letter first. His familiar, sharp, cursive writing immediately brought tears to my eyes. My dearest Harper, if you are reading this, it means my worst fears have materialized. It means Robert and Eleanor have shown their true colors, found a way to break the temporary trust, and attempted to sell Alder Creek to fund their hollow, pathetic lifestyle. I always knew my son was a coward, but I hoped he would at least have the decency to respect his own daughter's future. Clearly, I was wrong. But do not cry, my girl. I did not leave you defenseless. I taught you how to play the game, and I always play 5 moves ahead. Your parents think they sold the estate. They did not. They sold a very expensive, utterly useless illusion. Read the attached documents carefully. Take them to Donovan Hayes immediately. Destroy them, Harper. Destroy them all. Love always, Grandpa Harrison. I set the letter down, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, and turned my attention to the legal documents. They were incredibly dense, filled with complex real estate jargon, but thanks to the years I spent sitting in Grandpa's mahogany study, I understood exactly what I was looking at. And as the reality of his brilliant, unparalleled trap washed over me, a wicked, triumphant laugh ripped its way out of my throat. My grandfather had not put the entirety of Alder Creek into that vulnerable trust. He had deliberately severed the estate into 3 distinct legal entities years before he died. The trust that my parents controlled, the one they had just fraudulently liquidated and sold to Preston Cole, only contained the surface rights to the land and the physical structure of the manor house. But in the state of New York, property rights can be legally decoupled. The first document was an irrevocable, permanent easement and transfer of deed for the singular 2-mile paved road that led from the public highway to the manor. That road was not part of the trust. It was deeded entirely to a private LLC, of which I was the sole owner. Preston Cole owned the manor, but he did not own the only road leading to it. But that wasn't even the best part. The second document was a mineral, water, and subsurface rights deed. Grandpa had legally stripped the surface land of all its underlying value and transferred those rights directly to me. Preston Cole wanted to build a massive luxury resort. A resort requires massive water pipelines, deep sewer systems, and extensive foundational excavation. By law, Preston Cole could not dig a single inch past the topsoil without my express, written permission. He couldn't drill a well. He couldn't lay pipes. He had just paid $12 million for a piece of land that was legally impossible to develop. And the final masterstroke? The third paper was a federally recognized historical and ecological preservation charter. Grandpa had quietly registered the old stone chapel and the surrounding 300 acres of old-growth forest on the property as a protected sanctuary for a highly endangered species of local bat. The charter stipulated severe federal penalties for any commercial development or noise pollution within a mile radius of the sanctuary. Preston Cole, the ruthless billionaire developer, had bought a landlocked, undiggable, federally protected prison. And my parents, in their blinding, greedy haste to get a paycheck, had signed a legally binding seller's disclosure, claiming the land was totally unencumbered and fully developable. They had committed massive, easily provable corporate fraud. The trap was set. The jaws were ready to snap shut. I gathered the papers, placed them carefully into my leather tote bag, and walked out of the bank vault. I didn't feel like a victim anymore. I felt like an executioner. I didn't call my parents. I didn't send them a warning text. I simply drove straight to the law offices of Donovan Hayes. When I showed Donovan the documents from the vault, the stoic, humorless lawyer actually let out a loud, genuine bark right after. "Harrison, you absolute magnificent bastard," Donovan whispered, shaking his head in sheer awe as he reviewed the severance deeds. Harper, do you understand what this means? I understand that Preston Cole is going to sue my parents into the Stone Age, I replied coldly. Set the meeting, Donovan. Bring everyone to the estate tomorrow morning. Tell Preston it's a mandatory compliance meeting regarding the property transfer. Tell my parents they need to be there to sign a final tax release form. Don't tell them I'll be there. The trap was primed. The following morning, the skies had cleared, leaving Alder Creek bathed in bright, unforgiving sunlight. I arrived an hour early, parking my rental car out of sight behind the old carriage house. I stood in the shadow of the massive stone columns of the front porch, waiting. Preston Cole arrived first in his sleek black Mercedes, followed closely by his team of architects holding massive blueprints. 10 minutes later, my parents pulled up in a leased Porsche Cayenne. Eleanor was wearing a ridiculous oversized sun hat, and Robert looked incredibly annoyed to be dragged out of the city. They all gathered on the front lawn, exchanging pleasantries. Preston was loudly explaining his vision to bulldoze the south gardens for an infinity pool. I think the infinity pool will add tremendous value, Preston, Robert said smoothly, trying to sound like a seasoned real estate mogul. A brilliant vision. It is a brilliant vision, I said, stepping out from the shadows of the porch. It's just a shame you'll never be able to build it. The entire group froze. My mother gasped, clutching her designer handbag. Robert's face instantly flushed dark red. Harper? What on earth are you doing here? Robert demanded, stepping forward. I told you. This property is sold. You are trespassing. Preston Cole rolled his eyes, signaling to one of his security guards. I don't have time for this family drama. Remove her. Before your goons touch me, Preston, you might want to look at this, I said, my voice projecting loud and clear across the lawn. I pulled the stack of documents from my bag and tossed them directly onto the hood of Preston's Mercedes. Preston looked at me, his eyes narrowing in suspicion, before he picked up the papers. His high-priced corporate lawyer stepped up beside him to read over his shoulder. Silence fell over the lawn. It was a beautiful, deafening silence. I watched Preston Cole's smug, arrogant face undergo a rapid, terrifying transformation. The color completely drained from his cheeks, leaving him a sickening shade of pale gray. His hands began to shake slightly. His lawyer practically snatched the papers from him, his eyes scanning the legal jargon with growing horror. Mr. Cole, the lawyer stammered, his voice cracking. These are severance deeds. And a federal ecological charter. Sir, the seller did not possess the subsurface rights, or the access road rights. What does that mean? Preston barked, veins bulging in his neck. It means, I interrupted, stepping off the porch, that you own the dirt, Preston, but you don't own the rock underneath it. You cannot dig a foundation. You cannot lay plumbing. Furthermore, I own the only access road leading to the highway, and as of midnight tonight, it is a private, gated toll road. The toll for your construction vehicles will be $1 million per crossing, and even if you helicoptered your materials in, you'd violate the federal ecological charter protecting the bat sanctuary in the woods, triggering massive federal indictments. Preston Cole slowly turned to look at my parents. The look in his eyes was pure, unadulterated venom. It was the look of a predator who had just realized he had been fed poisoned bait. You signed a seller's disclosure, Preston snarled at my father, his voice a low, terrifying growl. You signed a sworn legal document stating this land was unencumbered and developable. You defrauded my company out of $12 million. Robert began to panic, taking a step back, his hands raised defensively. No, Preston, we didn't know. We thought the trust held everything. The judge signed off on it. I don't care what you thought, Preston roared, completely losing his composure. You committed corporate fraud. I will ruin you. I will freeze every single asset you have. I'll see you both rot in federal prison. Eleanor let out a sharp, hysterical shriek, dropping her designer handbag onto the grass. She looked at me, tears streaming down her face, finally realizing the magnitude of what they had done. Harper, please, you have to fix this. Give him the rights. Tell him it's a mistake. I looked at my mother. I looked at the brand new Cartier diamond necklace shining at her throat, the necklace bought with my grandfather's blood, sweat, and legacy. I felt absolutely nothing for her. No pity, no remorse, only a cold, profound sense of justice. I'm afraid I can't do that, Mother, I said smoothly, turning my back on them. I have a flight to catch back to London. Enjoy the lawsuits. The fallout was swift, brutal, and entirely public. Preston Cole's legal team immediately filed an emergency injunction, freezing all of my parents' bank accounts, including the offshore index funds they had hidden my inheritance in. Because they had signed the fraudulent disclosure documents to expedite the sale, they were held personally and criminally liable. The $12 million they received from Cole was clawed back instantly. The $5 million they had spent on their trustee fees, the new cars, the jewelry, and paying off their massive debts, they didn't have it to give back. My parents were forced to declare total bankruptcy. Their penthouse was seized by the bank. Their cars were repossessed. Robert was indicted for wire fraud and perjury for lying to the judge about the estate's financial distress, and he is currently serving a 4-year sentence in a minimum security federal facility. Eleanor moved into a tiny, run-down one-bedroom apartment in Queens, completely ostracized by the high society friends she had sacrificed her own daughter to impress. As for Preston Cole, he was stuck with a $12 million piece of undevelopable land that cost him $500,000 a year in property taxes. Desperate to stop the bleeding, he begged me to buy it back. 6 months later, through my newly formed LLC, I bought Alder Creek back from Preston Cole. I didn't pay $12 million for it. I paid exactly $1 million. Today, I am 26 years old. I live full-time in the magnificent stone manor my grandfather built. I run the estate precisely the way he taught me. The antique furniture is back where it belongs, the forests are protected, and the Miller legacy is secure. My parents tried to burn my future to the ground to keep themselves warm, but they forgot one very important thing about fire. If you aren't careful, it will consume you completely. If you want more satisfying stories of ultimate revenge and toxic family members getting exactly what they deserve, make sure you hit that like button right now. Don't forget to share this video with someone who loves a brilliant plot twist, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss out on the daily drama. Have you ever had a family member try to steal from you? Let me know in the comments below.